to our call this morning. It was very short notice, and that all of you responded so promptly. Thank you very much. We also want to thank you for the coverage over the past few weeks that we have had the press conferences, especially over the last week and a half when we are having them on a daily basis. And I know we did that already, but I also want to apologize for is it Tuesday miscommunication where we had intended to have the press conference and something came up that was discontinued but was not communicated to the media in time that you actually were here, so we apologize for any inconvenience that may have caused. So, but again, thank you overall for the coverage you've given us and for being here whenever we have called for press conference. This will, of course, be our final press conference, at least organized one, until the general election. I'm sure you guys are going to meet candidates and other people on an impromptu basis to ask all those questions that you so want to ask. But today we are wrapping up officially, and to remind you that we had launched our manifesto on Wednesday night. I think by now every member of the press does have. We did give copies to those press people who were present on Wednesday, so maybe the message to filter them up to the rest of you was not passed on, but we did give it to them, and we have given to you this morning. You would have heard the individuals who spoke to certain aspects of the manifesto on Wednesday as well, and the Prime Minister's overarching policy statement on the manifesto. So, JD, if you want to have some comments before, and then we open the floor to you for your comments. JD?
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You'll forgive me, but my voice is not in the best.
Actually, the voice came out today, actually. Today is Friday? Oh, no, it came out yesterday.
I just want to, again, as the chairman did earlier, I want to thank all members of the media for your continued coverage. My transition from the office of the Prime Minister as Press Secretary to the St. Lucia Labour Party as Communications Director was very easy because of that rapport that we had previously and we continue to maintain to filter information to the public through you. So I really want to thank you for that. Before we go into your questions, I just want to bring you up to speed with the St. Lucia Labour Party's activities, organized activities for the next 3 days. Today is Friday, it is Red Day. If you notice, you would see that a lot of our supporters are out there wearing their party color, wearing the symbol as well. And it is very heartening, a lot of the responses that we have gotten so far, that people are out there representing and they're very excited about Monday. Tomorrow is the launching of Gibeon Ferdinand. Gibeon Ferdinand is the St. Lucia Labour Party's candidate for Mico South. He's a candidate that we are very excited about. He's a candidate we have a lot of confidence in. He is very much connected to the people of Mico South. And since he was announced by the Prime Minister at the launching of Brother Joachim Henry, he has been on the ground, he has been mobilizing, he has been meeting people, he has been hosting activities. We begin at 5 p.m. tomorrow, and the activity will be held at the Deriso playing field. We expect that it will be a mammoth crowd. I believe it is expected to be the largest activity in terms of attendance that we have had so far. Many persons are excited about it, and there are various reasons people are excited about Mico South. Our candidate is a man who is very well loved in his constituency. He is very much connected to the people of Mico South. He is someone that they're very proud of because of his connection with the constituency and how he has been able to influence a lot of the young people within that constituency. But we cannot ignore that there's a Shasni factor as well. And so as a result of that, this is a sit where there is a lot of national focus, even from individuals who are outside of that constituency. So we know and we understand that Mico South is not just any other seat where there is a domestic campaign to run, but it features very highly on our national agenda as well. One thing that I know is that because of the support that he has received on the ground, because of how the young people are mobilized, because of how the people in the constituency are excited and ready to go out and vote, on the 6th of June 2016, this seat for the second time will be returning to the St. Lucia Labour Party. We have a number of public meetings that are scheduled as well within the constituencies. Most of the constituencies will be hosting domestic meetings. Our Prime Minister, for example, will be hosting a public meeting in Bruceville this evening, and we know that other parliamentarians will be joining him there. On Sunday, which we deliberately did not set any national activities on that day, it is a day for the constituencies to do that final check to ensure that everything is in place for voting day, which is on Monday. But many of the constituencies have scheduled whistle stops within the constituency so that there could be this final push to share the St. Lucia Labour Party's message, to focus primarily on our 15 pledges that we made to the people of St. Lucia. But each constituency has 5 priorities that they have listed for the next term in office, and it is on the back of the manifesto of the St. Lucia Labour Party, so you could refer to it there as well. And I just want to say again, and it is coming from the bottom of my heart, thank you to the media, because we really have had quick response. We have had, certainly I can speak for myself, the media engagement has been very positive, and every opportunity has been given during this campaign for our candidates and officials of the Labour Party to be featured on a lot of the programs that we have had. Newspin, for example, if you notice, every other day there has been a Labour Party candidate or official featured on that program. I also want to thank Scadi on Blazing FM for Rock the Vote. The St. Lucia Labour Party has been very well represented there as well. And all of the other programs, from my end, I must say a very special thank you to Choice TV, because In the Red Zone is carried on that media house, and every Monday we have had an opportunity, an hour, to share our own message, to share our vision, and particularly to speak to the people of St. Lucia of the achievements of the Labour Party administration over the last 4.5 years. So thank you, and I will hand you back over to the chairman.
Thank you very much. Take your questions. No, the president is there. You can't do that.
Oh, stop.
Just kidding, Daddy. Just kidding.
Still, I want to understand what perspective or what insight, what perspective. What's the approach, to the whole decriminalization of marijuana? I want to understand. What will be the objective from establishing a commission to review that piece of legislation?
But surely this is something that has to not just take in the views of the Labour Party. There is an entire society's views to look into, to get their feedback, to let all voices contend. And I can assure you that the introduction of a committee to look into that, I'm just trying to get the area where it's dealt with.
Within the first 6 months.
Pardon? 5-4? Right, so it will be a multidisciplinary commission to initiate wide-ranging stakeholder discussion and to make recommendations to the government on a position. Now, there is a school of thought that says, look, just put the thing to a referendum. I know one reporter was asking me a question, why just not put it to a referendum? The other one is, why a commission? Why not just pass the law? But really something is like that requires some sort of overall policy. I mean, people talk about the United States and completely ignore the fact the United States federal government has still not yet decriminalized marijuana. It is the individual states that has done that to a certain extent. And even then, within the states that have done that, you can still be charged federally. So we want to make sure we have the right balance and the right decision is made at the end of the
The
day.
reason why I ask, because there's a commission established, or will be a commission established, and commissions, I mean, we can appreciate how much the amount of effort that would have to go into ensure that everything is in order. How can then a re-elected Labour government ensure that this commission will at least be expedient in trying to draw up these recommendations?
Well, a time frame has been established, and for some of the pledges put forward by the Prime Minister, he has actually put in place a time frame that he wants to see some of these things happen. The Commission, of course, the conversation about marijuana has been going on for some time, and Prime Minister Anthony, his preference would have been for there to be a regional approach to the situation. He recommended to CARICOM that a commission be established to look at the issue of marijuana and its use within the region. There's not been movement as he would have liked in that area, and what we are seeing is that some individual countries have gone ahead to have their own reviews to determine what is best for them. The idea of a commission, as opposed to simply going ahead and implementing a law, is that you want a process put in place to look at every facet of the impact, the use, and also the consequences, social and otherwise, of the decriminalization of marijuana. You would also need to determine basic things like what quantities, whether you want to put in place different zones and so on. So what the Prime Minister has established is that within the first 6 months, he will move to establish that commission. But of course, you would have to go ahead with the terms of reference, and that commission would have to review what currently exists, the existing laws. You would have to review as well the structure, because there has to be some form of support or review of what currently exists to deal with some of the social ills that we are facing and we are likely to face if there is not adequate control and if there is not an adequate overview of that move. And so we cannot say right now that the Commission is going to bring to us a report 2 months after they have been established, or a commission is going to bring us a report 6 months after they have been established. But what the Labour Party has said is that within the first 6 months, that commission will be established. We will give the commission the resources needed to go ahead and do their work. Obviously, there are some special groups within our society. They have spoken very loudly, and we understand what their views are, but we simply cannot take what is said over the radio, for example, as that guiding factor. They would have to be consulted, and we would have to review so many other things as well.
For example, just now, for example, in the UK, what they have done, as JD indicated, is to allow certain quantities to be more like ticketable offenses rather than be arrested. And so we have to look at all that. So I just wanted to add that.
Kina James, RCI News. What would your response be to people who are skeptical about, the parties being genuine about the initiative? Because just this morning I spoke to the leader of the cannabis movement, and he said he's not sure who is actually genuine. So what would be your response to something like that?
Well, I can answer that for you. Are you speaking about Mr. DeCaires?
No, actually,
Oh, okay, because I had a discussion, might have been earlier this year or late last year with Mr. DeCaires. And I actually indicated to Mr. DeCaires that as President of the Senate, I was prepared to entertain a debate in the Senate on marijuana. I actually gave Mr. DeCaires the procedure to follow to get that document before the Parliament, and he never did it. So I can speak as President of the Senate. I did not require the Prime Minister's permission or the Speaker's. It's a different house. I spoke to Mr. DeCaires, and I go on record as saying that, and gave him the procedure in which he could have put forward a document before the Parliament, before the Senate, and we would have debated it. Dr. King was also told of that. So if you want to know how serious we are, I don't know how much more serious I can be if I was prepared to allow the debate in the Senate.
I think one thing we must note on the establishment of the Marijuana Commission is that because we are closely linked and we are a small region, there obviously would be consequences for any policy shift or change within any individual islands. St. Vincent, for example, Dominica, we're very close, and given what has happened before and given what we know of marijuana, the movement of drugs within the region and so on, we understand that there is a very strong link. What our Prime Minister has said, even as he has expressed his disappointment with how CARICOM has approached this issue, not just this issue, but a number of other issues that we face as a region, our work in St. Lucia and our review is not going to stand alone and be independent of everything else. So it is not as if we are going to ignore what is happening in all of the other islands and just go ahead, look internally and make our own decisions. Our commission is still going to work with the commission established by CARICOM, and as opposed to having an external body reviewing what exists in St. Lucia and waiting until there is consensus within the wider region to make a recommendation, the commission that will be established within the next 6 months by the St. Lucia Labour Party would have to work closely as well with the commission established by CARICOM.
Now, I don't want us to get too choked up on marijuana.
Blame Rihanna.
But I realize the reason I think I noted on the night of the manifesto launch, the St. Lucia Labour Party, there are a number of things that were highlighted, and the proposal to establish a commission for the decriminalization of marijuana had the most seats. It was the most liked, the most shared, most liked, most shared, and it had the greatest number of views on Facebook. It had a number of views. So it seemed to be something that is resonating with people. It's in both negative and positive reviews coming from it.
But a couple of things on there, because the Labour Party has undertaken to discuss the marijuana issue in the past.
Well, we did. There were discussions organized by the Soufriere MP recently.
Yeah.
There was a panel discussion on that.
I mean, if we go way back, that's one thing. And the other thing is, the Minister for Justice had indicated that there will be no decriminalization or legalization on his watch over his dead body. How do you rationalize that position with the position that is now being taken by the Labour Party in terms of looking into this matter seriously?
I think.
Sorry, last one. The last one is.
No, you'll follow because you might confuse us too much.
No,
too many questions.
I promise I'm not confusing you. Does that mean too that the Minister for Justice will not be part of
The next cabinet.
your regime going forward since he has taken that position?
We'll take the last one first. The composition of the cabinet is the sole preserve of the Prime Minister. So that's the end of that. The Minister for National Security put forward his personal position. The Cabinet of Ministers has not put a position. The government of St. Lucia has now put, the Labour Party has now put its position forward that it will do this and it will proceed. You would know of the collectivity of cabinet where you may have your own personal views, but you follow the dictates of the majority. And that is, I'm sure you'll appreciate that many cabinet decisions that have come out, not just on marijuana, not just in this government, but in previous governments, and I'm sure will happen in the future, that not everybody's on board with everything, but there's a collectivity of cabinet. So the National Security Minister has put forward his personal view, and that's all it is.
Okay, I didn't hear anything concerning the customs. What's the development agenda, if there is any, going forward into another term?
The what?
Customs and excise.
What about
Is
that?
there a development agenda, something to make operations a bit more efficient? What has been ongoing? What will be continued?
Well, first of all, SLASPER and customs, you can't really put them in the first, because SLASPER is a statutory board which has its own. Are there plans going forward for customs? Certainly, we have to modernize the customs to deal with international trends. Certainly, there has been quite a lot of movement in the way customs operates. I don't pretend to be a customs expert, but I'm sure there has been some movement in the new forms that some things are digitized now, that you can do some pre-clearing or something like that now. So there are plans to move forward.
There's nothing in here concerning that agency specifically being priority.
Because customs is a part of the Ministry of Finance.
Right.
So,
But there's nothing specifically, outlined for addressing
If you go
what
to our last manifesto, you would realize too that there are things that were not in the manifesto that the government of St. Lucia
Yes,
did.
they do.
So as a government, and any administration would have to face that, you have to adapt and you have to adjust where the greatest needs would be. And this is why sometimes you find there are administrations who would have outlined a set of policies but would not stick to it in the order in which it is placed. Or you may have some things happening earlier in the term and some things happening later on in the term. What the manifesto is a guide as to what the government intends to do, where the greatest focus for the administration would be. And so if you realize our last manifesto, for example, there was a very, very heavy focus as it relates to our youth. There was a very, very heavy focus as it relates to our infrastructural development. It was because of where we were at that point. St. Lucia, for example, had been severely ravaged by Hurricane Thomas, and coming out of that, the period immediately after that, there was not great movement in terms of the restoration of the bridges, in terms of the restoration of the Battle Hill, in terms of getting our infrastructure back onto an acceptable level. And so the Labour Party's manifesto coming into government at that time, at the time where unemployment had increased by 11% over a 5-year period, at the time where we were experiencing negative economic growth, and at the time where we were still trying to come to terms with how we would repair the damage done by Hurricane Thomas, that was the focus. But it did not mean that we will not seek to address other areas and work in other areas. And so I think when we look at what is presented in the manifesto, it does not mean that because there is nothing specific to the fire service, but there is on a priority list the construction of a headquarters for the police force, that the police force becomes more important than the St. Lucia Fire Service. They are essential services, and we understand that there must be plans to continue to modernize, to make it more efficient, to equip them, and to ensure that the specific laws are put in place, for example, so that they are able to do their work freely. Even though it is not written there, the government would have a responsibility to ensure that these things are done. We implemented the anti-gang legislation in this current term, and this would not have been something that would have been featured as something we intended to do at the time. But if you realize what we were dealing with at the time in terms of crime and so on, then there would have had to be a response by any serious government to deal with what it is faced at that present moment.
That's a perfect segue into my area of question. And you spoke of the manifesto, the 2011 manifesto. I did a comparative analysis of that with your 15-point pledge to the nation.
Yes.
And what I have determined is that at least 9 of those pledges are promises that were made in the 2011 manifesto that yet go unfulfilled. And if I go, let me just go through a couple of them.
Sure.
Very quickly. The income tax, personal income tax allowance from $18,000 to $30,000. In the 2011 manifesto on page 13, it was stated that once VAT is introduced, our SLP government will reduce taxation on working people by raising the threshold over the next 5 years for the payment of income tax from $18,000 annually to at least $21,000. That was one done. If I go on to
the threshold was increased in the currency of this administration.
I'm just comparing.
From 16.
No, it was increased during the.
I'm comparing, and these are.
No. I'm just saying that in fact in the currency the last 4 years the tax threshold was increased.
But it said to at least $21,000. That was not done.
I am not sure what it is now. What is it now? 18?
It is 18 now,
Is it now?
but
But
Clinton,
it was-
let us
it was
establish
16.
that though.
Can I just get through a couple more?
No, but we take them one by one.
No, it's just I'm just giving just various examples.
Yeah.
Pledge 5.
So
where
the
you says-
tax is one.
Yeah. Pledge 5, where you say you will introduce a program to assist parents in meeting CXA costs.
Yes.
That will come into effect in 2017.
Right.
On pages 31, 35. Under the secondary education, it is stated here that you will meet the CXA examination cost for those parents who cannot afford the payments. That was in the manifesto. And I'll just give one.
Oh, but there was within the 5-year period a number of secondary school students whose parents could not afford have been helped for bursaries. What we are saying now, we're going further this time. But I understand the point you're making, but it's not like nothing took place on those manifesto pledges. There was movement on them.
And I'll just look at Pledge 10. We will implement universal healthcare. That's Pledge 10. So that every St. regardless of financial ability, will be able to get proper and affordable healthcare. In the 2011 manifesto on page 38, it is stated that in this term of office, our party will implement universal healthcare. We will agree on the publicly guaranteed package of services. We will cost these services, identify how the national system should deliver it, and we will make provisions for its financing. Again, it's on page 38 of the manifesto. So my question is, given the fact that these pledges or promises were made in the 2011 manifesto, and we're coming now to a new election, and these same promises are repeating themselves, what assurance do we have that these things will actually get done?
Okay, the first thing I'd say to you, Clinton, is that these were manifesto pledges for the 2011 election. Directly we got in, comments and statements were made that it would not be possible, for example, to have gone the whole hog of universal healthcare. These statements were made. Secondly, we expected, for example, like St. Jude's Hospital and the Owen King E Hospital to have been further advanced. So it was not possible to have done those things then, and we did not expect the economy to have been what it was when we got in there. We had to recover from the bad economy that we inherited. And we made those pronouncements very early in the new term that a number of the things we had said in that regard could not have been done that term. The Prime Minister has said over the last few months, not just in this manifesto, that with the economy stabilizing and growth expected, we can now proceed into the healthcare. So yes, there will be skepticism because, as you pointed out, some of the pledges were there not necessarily as distinct pledges as they are now, but they were there in the manifesto as promises. So that's one of them.
If I may add, for any individual who is assessing the St. Lucia Labour Party and trying to make a determination as to whether the future of this country is better with the Labour Party or whether we should go back to the chaos which existed between 2006 and 2011, I think we need to look at in total the performance of these two administrations. In our manifesto, our 2016 manifesto, if you look to the front of that manifesto, we have outlined our achievements for 2011, 2016. I cannot go through the list right now because we would be here for too long. But we have highlighted our achievements under the management of the economy and revitalizing our economy. We have looked at what has happened in terms of law and order. We have looked at what has happened in the area of healthcare. We have looked at what has happened in the area of job creation and all of that. If the people of St. Lucia will remember, a manifesto was presented by the United Workers' Party in 2006, promised 7,000 jobs. Unemployment increased from 2006 to 2011 by 11%, no jobs were created. They promised 7,000 new hotels, no hotels were constructed. They promised 7,000 new hotels. They did not promise 7,000 new hotel rooms. They promised 7,000 new hotels.
We can only go by what was there.
And the record is there, a dismal failure, an F, and I want you to check that the promise was 7,000 new hotels. 7,000 new jobs, 7 new hotels. 7,000 new jobs, 7 new hotels. Not one hotel was constructed. 7,000 new jobs,
expanded.
and there were no rooms. Now, we need to look at the performance of this country within the context of the overall economy. And we need to look at, too, whether the promises made by the St. Lucia Labour Party, there has been any movement towards achieving that. We indicated, for example, that we would implement universal health care. Over the last 4.5 years, the government of St. Lucia has been working to review what existed in the past, and we had to do new costings for the services. You cannot come into a government 5 years later and simply take what was sitting on a shelf for 5 years and go ahead and say you're going to implement a program. Obviously, a lot of things have changed. We have new infrastructure in place. We needed to upgrade our health infrastructure as well because what we left in 2006 It's not what we inherited in 2011. When we left St. Jude. St. Jude was a functioning hospital. When we left, plans were in place for the completion of the Owen King Hospital. And if there were no changes to the design by the UWP, for example, the hotel would have been, the hospital would have been completed and commissioned a long time ago. So we would have been in a better position to do so. What this government has done in preparation for the implementation of UHC is to bring in the consultants to do a complete review of our health system, not just in terms of services only, but the infrastructure, and we needed to do a cost analysis as well. That is complete, and that has been submitted to the Ministry of Health. Honorable Alvina Reynolds spoke about it when she presented on one of the pledges recently. And so we are in a position, once the new national hospital has been commissioned and St. Jude has been completed, the paperwork is there, the costing is there, the framework is there for the implementation of universal health care. On the issue of our meeting our promises to our students, we have delivered laptops to our students. We have delivered the Wi-Fi and the community access centers in the various communities. We have delivered to the students entering secondary school the $500 bursary. Every child received it. On the issue of the CXC payments, what we did was to establish a fund at SSDF, where through the principals of the various schools, they would submit a list of students within their schools that were not able to meet, but there was a limited number of students we could have accommodated under that program because it was not a full-fledged program reaching across the island to deal specifically with the needs. What we are going to do now is to implement a national program where all of our students, not simply subjected to the views of the teacher or the principal, we need to establish set criteria as to who qualifies, how that student can take advantage of that opportunity, and it will be unveiled just as we did the $500 bursary. There are things that we intended to do that we were unable to do because the priority of the government had to shift to deal with the difficult situation we face with unemployment. Unacceptable that unemployment was at 25%. So a lot of our energy and focus had to be into creating programs such as NICE to provide opportunities to our young people, creating the cruise ship employment program, providing incentives and opportunities for foreign investors to come into St. Lucia so that you could have investment to create opportunities, job opportunities for the people of St. Lucia. It will remain a priority for us in the new term, but given that we have been able to move from 25% to 20%, we are saying that there is more breathing space. And with the Citizenship by Investment program coming on board, where we know that there will be new investment in hotels and other areas, it will allow now the public funds to go towards other projects as opposed to being concentrated so heavily in job creation such as NICE and all of these other programs. So now that the economy is growing, foreign direct investment is coming back, more job opportunities will be created within the private sector, so there will be less of a stress on government and the public service to be driving the number of job opportunities created. So you will begin to see that shift into other areas such as our social protection and other areas of focus for the government.
But isn't it irresponsible on the part of any politician or political party to make promises without conducting a comprehensive analysis, doing that assessment? And the other party is guilty of it as well, that promises are being made without having enough information on whether the things that are being promised can actually be done.
But how would you propose an opposition get information on UHC and as to where the government is at the time
you can't get it.
with that? And you must remember
Thank
to
you very much, Mr. Chairman. Because we face the same problem.
freedom of information.
Isn't it time for us to enact the Freedom of Information Act?
I'm with you.
So that we can get public information that should be the purview of every single taxpayer in this country.
Yeah. And if you look
Not
at
all
our
information, though.
if you look
You
at
recognize
our
it, yeah.
last
It's classified in some.
our last manifesto too was prefaced by a message by a political leader who did indicate that what was in that manifesto was a long-term vision for the development of the country. And so some things would have had to be done urgently. For example, our Prime Minister, because of the congestion we face in the north, and especially because of the frustration we face when there are activities or if there are accidents and so on, it has been his desire to extend the 4-lane all the way up to Grosse Lane. Obviously, if you're coming in at a time where your economy is in the negative, where you have a fiscal deficit, if you're coming in where a government was borrowing money to pay civil servants on a monthly basis, an unemployment rate that was sky high, certainly any responsible government would have to ensure that fiscal prudence, would have to ensure that your expenditure, that you do it in such a way that does not put added pressure on the public purse. And so that project, always being one of concern and a priority for the Prime Minister, had to wait until the end, nearing the end of the term, where he was able to get financing from the QAT fund to allow that project to go through. So sometimes your priorities will change, depends on what you're facing. What you need is a Prime Minister, a leader who has the capacity and the ability to make these judgment calls, who is able to assess a situation, to sit with the technocrats, to sit with the international agencies, and to negotiate with them based on the needs of your country at that time. It cannot simply be going into the office of the Prime Minister with a blueprint and saying, come what may, flood, no matter what, this is what I am going to stick to, and if my pledges are number 1, 2, 3 until 15, until I've done number 1, I am not moving to number 3, and I'm not moving. This is not how it is supposed to work. A leader is supposed to be able to assess what is happening in the country at the time and respond to the needs of the people, respond to the will of the people according to the changes you have in your society. This is why you see, for example, we are making a priority the safety of our women. We've had too many reports, and we understand how this works, so we know not all of it is being reported. We need to create a safer environment. We will. Coming out of the cry from the people of St. Lucia, coming out of an assessment from those who have been working in areas dealing with vulnerable people, abused people, we will implement the sex offenders registry. We will review the laws, because a lot of our women who are abused, who are harassed, they do not go before the courts to provide evidence, because the process is one that exposes them to that same person who is being accused of raping them, who is being accused of molesting them, and so on. So as a matter of priority, the laws will be reviewed to ensure that our women feel safer, to ensure that our police and the other agencies are more empowered to respond to some of the reports that are coming to us. So you must be flexible. You must be able to respond. We never, in 3 years before, we never envisaged that the price of oil will be dropping so rapidly. That would force a government to now review its policy from a 3-month adjustment to a 3-week adjustment. But you have to make these adjustments as a government to respond to the needs of the people and to also make decisions that are in the best interest of the people of the country at the time.
Clinton, no, I just want to say, just to emphasize one of the points Jadia made based on your question about the similarities in some of the pledges. If you go back to the Prime Minister, to the manifesto launch of 2011, the then opposition leader did make the point that this was a 10 to 15-year plan. It was not a 5-year. Right. So obviously not everything could have been done in the 5 years, but we have come a long, long way.
Well, I understand that. However, there are certain time frames, certain objectives that were identified within the manifesto, and that's what I spoke to.
Okay.
Sure.
Just before I turn over to Riani, there are a couple of things. On the corruption issue, a number of people voted for the SLP in 2011 on the premise that there would be a cleanup in our governance structure of the corruption. That has not happened. We have not seen any of the people who have been accused, the former parliamentarians and those who are sitting right now, who have been accused of very many crimes, being brought before the courts or even charges brought against them, when the SLP administration has had the DPP's office, the AG's chambers, the courts, and all other agencies under their control.
No, it
It's-
doesn't
it's-
have the DPP's office under his control.
It's another.
No, it's
under
not.
Ministry of Justice.
It's not. It's only administratively for purposes of salaries. The DPP's office is a constitutional position that is
I
independent of the government. No, I don't want to leave the wrong impression that the Minister for Justice, because it's under his control, can give direction. It's under his administrative control in terms of salaries and the like, not in terms of direction.
I still say there's control because you can still determine the size of the office, how many people operate from there, how quickly things get done because of the resources that are injected into this department. So I would still maintain that there is some measure of control. My question is, people looking at it right now, 5 years might be considering, one, that the allegations made are not true, and therefore there is nothing that can be presented to a court. Two, that there is incompetence, and as a result, with mounting evidence or with a mountain of evidence, nothing has been able to stick and nothing has been able to be presented for prosecution. Or three, which is rather disturbing, that there is a lack of will on the part of our politicians because they know sometime they'll be in opposition and they don't want the same thing to happen to them. Can you speak to that a bit and tell us, explain why there has been very little to no movement as far as that promise or that feeling that the electorate had that there would be a cleanup of governance and almost eradication of corruption in our system?
Good question, Clinton. First of all, I would challenge the press to go to the DPP's office, and you will see that never in the history of that office has it been as well staffed as it was under this current administration. There was only one position outstanding, which was Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions. Now, notwithstanding your premise, I return to the constitutional position. The office of the Director of Public Prosecutions is an independent one, to the point where the executive branch of government, headed by the Prime Minister, makes no appointment to that office. So therefore, the advertisements for the Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions would have gone through the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. Once they identify the person, the terms and conditions of that person's employment are then dealt with by the public service. Under this administration, not a single person was identified by the Judicial and Legal Services Commission to the public service. Not one. And we can show you there were advertisements put for the position. So the lack of a person there is in no way the fault of the executive branch of government. Secondly, it would be unfair to say that the Labour Party government did not live up to its promise to look into what it alleges was corruption. The result of that promise was the Town and Villages Council's report. That report was promptly submitted to the Director of Public Prosecutions Office. As we speak now, nearly 3 years later, there has not been a single pronouncement from that office. Ironically, when the backlash about the impacts report came, it was not as a result of any statement made about impacts. It was as a result of a statement made by the Minister for Housing about the Town and Village Council's report and calling on the DPP to make a statement on that. The DPP instead chose to speak about impacts. But if you go through your own records, you will see that it was the Town and Villages Council report that when the government recognized nothing was happening at that end, it was at that point the government used another avenue open to it, which was the Attorney General's office, to bring civil proceedings. But the Attorney General, under our Constitution, cannot bring criminal prosecutions. The sole person to bring criminal prosecutions under our Constitution is the Director of Public Prosecutions. The government did the next best thing to bring civil proceedings against 2 members. These proceedings are before the court. So it's not fair to say the government did not live up to its promise to do something about the allegations that were made while it was in opposition. We have done everything that we can legally do. Anything more is to infringe on the separation of powers.
I just want to expound, if you can, on the elected town council members. That's interesting. How is that gonna, what was the objective for setting up that sort of framework? In the next administration.
Oh, okay. Well, if you look at the Constituency Councils Act, which was the first major piece of legislation passed by the Labour Party in April of 2012. That act, in fact, was to set the stage to return to elected councils. And that is what we are now saying, that we believe that the Constituency Councils Act has settled local government, and to the point where we can now return to elected government. There are some things, Riani, that ought not to be the preserve of central government. For example, the garbage disposal in the community, that really ought to be at the local government level. And we really ought not to continue with the imposition of the councils by central government. It ought to be the people electing their own councillors. Moreover, if you go, you might be a little too young for that, perhaps Clinton can remember. It's not to say Clinton is old, but what we have is a situation now, because there is no elected councillors, of a number of politicians simply emerging from the general population into politics. People tend to believe that you can run a business and then automatically run government. These are entirely two different things. There is a school of thought by the older generation that politicians of old were better able to deal with governance because most of our politicians came from local government. So they had some experience at the local government level and were therefore better prepared for the nuances of central government. No scientific study has been done. The older people maintain that it's better. And when you look at those politicians whom people considered to be being the beloved politicians of the George Mallets, the Harold Rocks, a number of them came from local government. So they might be merited.
The process, what was the election process? Or the election?
Oh, it's the same process as a general election, except that only the voters within the constituency can vote for that council.
The time frame or the period, every 4 years, thereabouts, similar?
I can't remember the time frame it was in the past. I really can't. But it did not mirror national government. But again, even in here, we said we are looking at fixed election dates for national elections. And perhaps some countries, in Trinidad, I think, it coincides with national elections, the local government elections, that is. Some in Jamaica, maybe halfway. We don't know what the model is, but you'll have to look at the logistics. There are some people who say it is better at the same time, in that less resources are spent, but there are others that are saying it's burdensome on the electorate when they have to vote for more than one thing or person at a time. So there are schools of thought in both. We haven't decided.
Two things for me. The Don Anderson poll, when was this done?
We are in.
I think we gave a date in the press.
We are
release.
in.
We're in June.
In June, May.
So it was
May. And we did a more recent poll, not by Don Anderson, over the weekend of, what is the last weekend, 23rd to
23rd
23rd and 24th?
Okay, so what's your agenda for Sunday? What's the party's agenda for Sunday?
I suspect you
came in
came in late.
Yes, I did.
So you need to apologize to Clinton and the rest of them for coming
Oh,
late.
well, you'll have to wait for that because I have one more question. So, Michael, you'll have to wait.
So quickly, because that's what I need.
We, as JD will tell you because she did say, for Sunday, we leaving Sunday open for the local candidates to do their own thing on that day within the
Our
constituency.
final national activity is tomorrow, which is
Tomorrow.
the launching of Gideon Ferdinand in Mikusar.
Okay, there have been calls for greater transparency within the government, particularly in the Ministry of External Affairs, since that vote parliament and what have you.
Well, I don't understand what is not transparent about Jafali.
More transparency.
Oh.
That's what I said. Any thoughts on that particular issue going forward?
Which issue?
The issue of more
Transparency.
within government
There's-
and ministry.
There is always room where governments can do better. There is always a room where government can explain things better than they have. And this government, under Kenny Anthony, in his 3 terms as Prime Minister, we are always striving to be as transparent as possible. I recall, for example, going back to 1997, when I was press secretary, we had weekly press conferences with the press secretary to deal with matters that were dealt with at the previous cabinet meeting, except for those that were of a national security nature. When Jada became press secretary, that was even expanded, not necessarily to the press conferences dealing with those things, but with the number and of areas in which the transparency was shown. Yes, we can always do better.
But I think we need to, having worked in government and being involved in, information, dissemination of information and all of that, I think there is a need for, within the various ministries, for there to be an equal level of engagement as there is in the office of the Prime Minister. We do our best to push information out to the public, to let people know what the Prime Minister is doing, what the overall government agenda is. But I think on the ministry level, then we need to strengthen the communication on the ministry
Absolutely.
level. The government of St. Lucia deployed communication officers to each of the ministries. Some have technicians with them, some do not. But I think in the new term, there would have to be a greater focus on establishing a structure and ensuring that the communication officers within these ministries are empowered to interact with the press on the very same level that a press secretary would be to interact with the press. It would mean too that these individuals would have to work closer with the ministers that they're assigned to. I think the current structure places them within the public service, and so they're often aligned or answerable to the permanent secretaries. We all know how the system of governance works in government and in ministries, but when you work directly with the person who's responsible for the ministry in terms of clearance and so on, you have a shorter time frame for approval of information and dissemination of information to the public.
In addition, the structure as it is now, as JD has explained, would not allow a communications officer within the ministry to speak on policy, because policy is a political issue. So we have to balance those two. One is not saying, let's get rid of the public servant communications officer. That's not what we're saying. We're simply saying there must be an avenue whereby the press can get more direct information from the individual ministries, because even the press secretary, as empowered as the press secretary is, press secretary would certainly not be in a position to know everything that is happening in every ministry. You had a question, Clinton?
Last question. In terms of this, these reports that are circulating about the revocation of visas.
We have dealt with that yesterday. We dealt with that.
But it
yesterday.
didn't.
And the Ministry
The
of
Ministry of
External
External Affairs
Affairs
issued a statement.
It's false.
It's false, and the Minister of National Security spoke to 2 media houses, I think, last night. Choice was one of them. HCS giving forceful responses to. So there's no truth to them. There's no truth to them.
And we will see a lot of these things in the next 3 days. I think at this point, the electorate needs to remain focused. We need to understand that in a period like that, especially where there is a desperate opposition, there will be a lot of stories. Propaganda will be flying high, whether it is on Facebook, whether it is through your cell phones, whether it is through flyers that they're dropping at the police stations and the fire stations. We need to ensure that as a people, we remain focused on where this country has been and where this country needs to go. We need to remind the people of St. Lucia that we have put forward our plans. Our plans include ensuring that every child has access to early childhood education. Our plans include setting up a tertiary fund so that our young people could get access to university. Our plans include establishing a commission within 6 months to look at the issue of the decriminalization of marijuana. We intend to implement a minimum wage. We intend to implement the sex offenders registry. We intend to give to our students assistance to pay their CXC fees. We intend to complete St. Jude by the end of this year and to have St. Jude and the Owen King Hospital open and fully operational to give way to the implementation of universal health care. We intend to rehabilitate the George Odlum Stadium immediately after so that we could reestablish it to more than what it was before, because we need to ensure that there is a balance between what is happening in other sports, cricket and so on, so that our athletes can find a home and there could be a center for development. And this one, I could tell you Dr. Ernest Illa is very passionate about it, and it's something that he has been bringing across forcefully in a lot of his engagements, that he wants to see a greater focus on our athletes so that there could be a development agenda for them, not just exposure, but we could build them so that we could go forward. So our message to the electorate is simple.
Stay focused.
We have presented our plans to you. You have understood that this is a government that reduced unemployment. This is a government that created NICE so that our people can get jobs. Remain focused in the next few days, and on the 6th of June, 2016, vote for the St. Lucia Labour Party.
Well, thank you very much. And again, I close by thanking the press for all the time you have taken off to be here with us and for responding so quickly, especially today, where the press conference was only advertised this morning. Thank you very much. And I wish you an enjoyable coverage of the national elections, and hopefully we'll see you on Tuesday morning for a second 5-year tour. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sure.